Hello, Planet Cybersec. I am super excited to be here. As Dave mentioned, we are talking about the business. What is that? Wow. How often do you think about the business? We're security folks. We're here supposedly to help the business, right? But how often do we kind of lose sight of that? And what is this new role? People are talking about the BISO. I know what a CISO is. I know what a Chief Information Security Officer is. What is this Business Information Security Officer thing we're talking about? Well, we're going to dive into all of that. But let me start by taking you on a little trip back. How many of you remember when you were 16 years old? Maybe 15 and a half, depending on where you lived. You were probably getting ready to get your driver's license. Well, I have kids of my own, and they are of driving age. So my youngest just got his driver's license a few years ago. And I remember as he was getting ready to take the road test, he started thinking about getting his own car, which first of all is crazy enough because he would be the first of my kids to get his own car. But, he comes to me with something like this. He says, I found this 2007 Mustang GT and it's used, so I can get it really, we could get it really cheap, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, I know why he wants a 2007 Mustang GT. Because he's going to get himself in all sorts of trouble with something like that. We know that. Come on, who wouldn't, right? So how excited do you think he was when I told him, nope, this is what you're getting, 2007 Toyota Camry. Suddenly, loses a little bit of that luster. So then fast forward a couple of years, it's time for me to get a new car. And because of life situations, this is the first time that I'm able to get the car that I want for myself. And so I go out looking and, I've got those same thoughts in my head. Like, I want something fun to drive, but I also need something responsible, right? I mean, I'm not going to go out and buy a quote unquote, and sorry for anyone that owns a sports car, but a midlife crisis car, right? I mean, I'm in my 40s, so that's kind of how I thought about things. But I mean, I can finally buy the car that I really want. So what do I really want? Well, I went out and this is what I got. The BMW 340i with the M Performance package. So those of you that know Beamers, that M Performance package means a lot. It means not only is this car already like fast, because the base model is fast, but then they add in a few little exhaust upgrades and other things. And this thing is really, really fast. It's a lot of fun. It gets me into trouble sometimes. But, it's a fast, fun car to drive. It's really nimble. It's really quick. It handles like crazy. I've never driven a car this nice before, at least not that I owned. And so great, I got this performance car. But it's also over and over and over again a top safety pick from Car and Driver. NTHSA loves the BMW 3 Series. It's one of the safest cars in its class. So I got this combination of the car that's still fun to drive, still really fast, but also safe to be in. And isn't that exactly what we need to be doing as security professionals? How often do the businesses come to us and say, we want to go really, really fast. We want the cool new toy. We're going to blow out this new technology. We want to go nuts with this thing. And security is right there to say, nope, you get the Camry. That's as much as we can let you have. How do we start to think about giving our business the car that's not only fun to drive, but it's also going to keep them safe? That's what we're here talking about. Now, we're also talking about this. When I talk to security executives, I hear a word more often nowadays than I've ever heard in the past. And it's a promising sign. I hear that word, I'm an enabler. Security enables the business. Maybe you've heard it, maybe you've said it yourself. But I'm kind of that type of person. I like to poke a little deeper. What does that mean? And so often when I ask that question, About the best answer I get is usually something like, well, we enable the business by reducing cybersecurity risk. Okay, that's not how this works. That's not enablement. We think it's enablement because we think that the business is held back by risk. When it comes to cybersecurity risk, the business isn't holding back, are they? We just heard a talking about how businesses will go out there and they will still do the thing. It doesn't matter. They're not interested in hearing about cybersecurity risk. So saying you enable the business by reducing risk isn't the answer. And even then, when I prod at that, okay, how do you reduce that risk? Of course, we talk about technology risk. We talk about these ethereal threats that we face and how, these very intangible things that we're going to protect the business against these risks. So we struggle a lot with our own value prop in security, and that hurts us. And this ties right back into that story of how do we actually enable the business? How do we give the business the fun to drive car that's also fast, or that's also safe, excuse me. So let me talk a little bit about my world. So I've been all over the map. I started in tech as a programmer. I got into security as a pen tester. I mean, I've been a hacker all my life. Bought my first computer at 12 and hacked into Prodigy, if any of you remember that. But over the course of my career, I got into leadership and I started having higher level conversations. I got into consulting for a while. I started working with organizations how to build their security programs. I started working for a VAR. And at this point, my focus was really on, okay, how do we have board level conversations? How do we improve that? How do we improve that discussion? Because those were the customers I was focused on. I was focused on CISOs and how do I get them to get approval for the initiatives that are ultimately going to result in them buying a product from my organization. Well, then I moved on and I went to a cloud native security vendor. Now suddenly that DevSecOps picture came into play because we're talking about cloud native and DevOps and CICD. Well, they all kind of fold in together, it seems. And so now I got really focused on how do we translate security into DevOps? How do we make DevSecOps actually happen? And I was with that organization for a while, and then I joined S&P Global Ratings. We're a credit rating agency. And suddenly now it was putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. So, I'm not just justifying security purchases anymore. It's not just growing DevSecOps culture. Now I have to show growth. I have to create investments in innovation and market placement. That's how I sell my security initiatives. And that's what we're talking about. So I am the BISO for S&P Global Ratings, which means I manage and lead our entire cybersecurity strategy for our roughly multi-billion-dollar ratings business. So it really started to reshape how I looked at security and how I looked at how we sell the value of security. Now that DevSecOps message is an interesting one. Why is that interesting? Because it creates all sorts of problems for us, doesn't it? And in security, we started talking about, we used to talk push left, push left, push left, push left all the time. Push left has become more and more irrelevant because now we got, our developers are pushing right. They're writing infrastructure as code. They're writing in code the very infrastructure on which their developed applications are going to run. And so then we did this really curious and kind of arrogant thing in security. We took a DevOps term, shared responsibility. We took it and we changed it. We started running around saying security is a shared responsibility. Everybody's responsible for security. What about the rest of it? If we're in DevSecOps, that means we are all a part of that infinity circle. We are all connected. We're all responsible for the same thing. We're supposed to be breaking down the barriers and creating shared responsibility. But we can't stand here and say security is everybody's responsibility unless we're willing to take on our part. So I know most of us probably don't really like Racy Matrix, and I shudder to put one up here, but I'm going to keep it simple so you don't run me out of the virtual building here. So if I look at this in terms of a Racy Matrix, this is traditional, right? Applications and infrastructure security, well, that falls to the security team. They're accountable for that. And then, you know, the development pipeline being fast, efficient, and effective, that's on our dev teams. And product stability and performance, well, that falls to our SREs and our operations team. Well, then we throw in that really arrogant thing that we do in security, and we say, oh, shared responsibility. Everybody's got to be responsible for security. So yeah, devs, SRE, you're responsible for security too. But the part of it we don't talk about in security is the fact that if I'm going to say that and I'm actually going to create real shared responsibility, that means that all of us share responsibility for each other's accountability. So if I'm going to say, hey, devs, hey, SRE, you're responsible for for application infrastructure security, that means me in security, I have to now accept responsibility for making sure that the pipeline and my development is efficient and effective. I have to be responsible for making sure that the production environments are stable and that they perform well. My security initiatives don't get to break those things. And it's when I start to think about that suddenly how we look at the DevSecOps message, how we look at security's involvement in our businesses, it starts to change. And how do I start to do this in a credible way? How do I overcome the challenges and start to become a part of that DevSecOps life cycle? How do I bring security to that? How do I become versed in how the things that I'm doing will impact the business? How do I align? Ooh, we've heard that word, right? Align initiatives with the business. How many of us actually do a good job of that? Well, that's when I jumped into this role here at S&P as the Business Information Security Officer. So let's talk about what a BISO is. Our traditional environment, many of you are familiar with this, where security is on one side, the business line is on the other, and there's this cavernous divide between the two sides. And we even refer to them as sides. How often do we do that? And there's this adversarial approach to things. And this is a challenge. I mean, I remember going back to my developer days, and I used to joke that, and I still joke because it's still true, the information security utopia would be that impenetrable room that's filled with a bunch of servers that aren't connected to anything, probably not even to power. It'd be super duper secure. Would it be completely useless? It's too easy, especially in the days of responding to things like Log4j and ransomware that's taking down payroll systems and all of these things that are going on. We often forget our purpose. Our purpose is to defend these businesses from those threats, to help the business do that in a way that's meaningful. We need to speak their language. We need to speak to their motivations, and we need to be aware. So where the BISO comes into this is providing that bridge. When people ask me what I do for a living, that's what I tell them. I am the bridge. I am the bridge between my multi-billion-dollar division that does credit ratings for large organizations and nation states, and the security team at the corporate level, who doesn't necessarily understand my highly regulated business environment, who doesn't necessarily understand the business goals. So it's a two-way bridge. And this is the thing that's really key. When I joined this organization and the CTO hired me and we talked, the first thing he told me was, you know, hey, look, I want you to build a security-minded culture. I want security first. That's kind of a buzzword we hear a lot too. And so I knew that was going to be a part of it. I mean, I would have expected that coming in. My role is going to be, how do I get the business to do more of the security things that we want them to do, right? But what it's turned out is that actually a vast majority of my job is going the other way. It's being the advocate for the business, advocating on their behalf, bringing business context to the security team, helping the security team understand how they can better align with what's going on in the business. So if they're going to propose a particular initiative, they want to spend a few $1 million on a security solution, I'm there to make sure, A, that they're thinking in terms of the business and that, you know, they understand whether or not that's going to break what we're doing, but also how do they leverage the business? How do they leverage the business in order to be able to gain buy-in, gain funding, gain support for their initiative? That's what a BISO does. So BISO's there advocating for security within the business line. I am working consistently on trying to bring security to the DevSecOps model. But notice what you don't see here. Typically in security, we're often really focused on gates. We see these different phases of the DevSecOps pipeline, and we want to build gates between them. Oh, you're doing a build, how cute. We're going to run our SaaS tool before you do that build. And if our SaaS tool isn't happy with the results, well, it's going to break your build. And then you have to back up in your pipeline. Oh, hey, you're getting ready to promote. Well, we're not going to let you promote that code to the next level until we do a dynamic application test. And if that DAS tool or our pen testers find something they don't like, well, guess what? We're going to push your pipeline backward. You won't go to release. That's the traditional way of thinking with security. But that is the exact way of thinking that loses us credibility and breaks the DevOps pipeline. So if we're going to sit here and say, hey, I'm responsible because I'm going to be part of your pipeline because I want DevSecOps, we already talked about what shared responsibility means, I can't think about security as a gate in the pipeline anymore. Security has to be integrated into these phases. I have to move away from concepts like break the build. I have to look at how can I make my pipeline mature enough and efficient enough that the vulnerabilities that I'm discovering are low enough severity and my pipeline is fast enough that I can simply log them to the backlog as P1 issues and take them on the next flow. That sounds scary to us as security people. We're like, oh my God, I'm gonna release vulnerabilities knowingly into production? Isn't that better than doing it unknowingly like we do now? How long has that vulnerability been in Log4j? How long have we been unknowingly releasing vulnerable code to production? It happens every day. Aren't we better off to at least understand it and log it and then know what we're going to fix? So that is advocating for security within the business line. But there's a flip side to this. As I said, I'm also advocating for the business when I speak to the security team. So I've got my business out there and they're trying to do some really innovative stuff, right? Cloud transformation. We're in a huge cloud transformation. I'm proud to say that my division is 100% cloud. We don't have anything in an on-prem data center anymore. No, yeah, some of that was lift and shift, but a lot of it is cloud native. I told you we're leveraging containers and functions and cool stuff like that. But we're also looking at AI and ML and how can AI and ML be used to improve the quality of our ratings, the speed of our ratings. How does it give us better rating surveillance? That's a part of our business. And so our technology teams are looking at that. My technology team is looking at blockchain. How do we leverage blockchain for something other than cryptocurrency and NFTs? All of these are really cool technologies that they want to use. These are all the really cool technologies that are continuing to explode on the scene that we are then as security people challenged to secure. So when I go to my security team and they're talking about an initiative, I'm advocating that their security practices not only don't break these, but actually help enable this type of innovation. That's my job as a BISO. So I break down my responsibilities into 4 areas. And when I'm talking best practices for BISOs, this is kind of a great way to think about it. First and foremost, we'll start from the lower left, and we'll do this kind of like a Gartner quadrant. I just said that too. That's another one I'm sure makes people cringe sometimes, because the quadrant model sometimes freaks people out. But, you know, on the lower left, that's kind of the business as usual stuff, right? That's vulnerability management, the very basics. How am I doing scans? How am I doing tests? Where do those results go? How do they get handled? Okay, great. Risk governance and compliance, I already mentioned to you, I'm super heavily regulated in this business. As a result of that, GRC is something I'm constantly working on. And the reality is, where we oftentimes in security, we kind of, I don't know why, but we want to like sort of push GRC away. Embrace GRC. GRC is a wonderful tool for you. Not only does that help you make sure that you're getting the good metrics you need, but oh my gosh, sometimes when you need it, only in that rare instance, but sometimes they're the hammer that you can bring. We're going to talk more about trying not to use the hammer, but let's get to that later. Upper left, application secure and product security. Now we're getting a little more on that like proactive side of things, right? Now we're forward looking. How do we get ahead of the game? Dealing with the software that we're developing. How do I automate things in my pipeline? How do I bring those security practices into that? And then finally, there's this idea of a security strategy and roadmap. What am I doing? What is my vision for the security of this division? And how am I going to accomplish it? How do my individual initiatives form together into a process that's going to lead me from where I'm at today at maturity level X to where I want to be 3 years from now at maturity level Y? This is the responsibility of the BISO, doing this within the business, bringing those conversations to the teams that often don't think to have those conversations. The ones that we like to bemoan so often because they just don't get it. They just don't listen to us. That's the job of a BISO, to make that communication happen. So with that in mind, let's talk about what makes a good BISO. Well, first and foremost, of course, they've got to have good cybersecurity knowledge. Broad, not necessarily in the weeds depth, good conceptual knowledge of cybersecurity practices. So, you know, I snagged NIST CSF here, right? We're all pretty familiar with NIST CSF. We like NIST CSF. Understanding how to leverage frameworks like that in a way that is meaningful for the organization that you're in. You need a BISO that's got that good understanding, that can see things at a higher level. You know, does a pen tester make for a good BISO? Maybe. But also maybe they might be really, really deeply focused in one area of security and not see that grander picture. So we're looking for somebody with a bit of a broader base knowledge, not just one focused area. And there's this idea, and I'm going to use another term I don't like. God, Alyssa, your presentation today is full of terms that you're complaining about. I know, but they still have meaning for people, so I use them. And so in this case, I'm talking about that idea of executive presence. As we'll see later, your BISO should be in those conversations where they're interacting with your executive leadership. They should be a part of your executive leadership. We'll talk about that too. They should be in front of your boards. So they need to be somebody who can have those conversations, understand the language that's used in those conversations, speak to those motivations. That helps make for a good BISO. They've also got to be empathetic. They got to understand bridge building. If BISO is going to be a bridge, they got to understand how to build bridges. And we build bridges with empathy. Being able to understand who you're talking to, what their challenges are, what motivates them, that's how you win support. That's how you gain credibility. If you go in there just demanding that people bow to your whim or do the things you want them to do, we know how that goes in security. It doesn't work. So how can I speak to people in a way that's meaningful to them, that speaks to their challenges? And then finally, we're looking for someone who's a strategic leader. You need to be someone who thinks big. You need to get out of the tactical. What am I doing in the next week or month to deploy these things? Instead, like I said before, how are they building that roadmap to get from point A to point B over the course of years? How do all those different layers fit together? My thought process needs to be where I want my organization to be 3 years from now. Not how am I going to get this new WAP installed, or how am I going to get this new EDR solution installed, or how am I going to win support for some new process that I want to roll out. Those are very tactical things. I need to be thinking strategically as a BISO because I'm responsible for an entire division cybersecurity program. How do we do this? All right, Alyssa, you convinced me. BISO sounds great. How do I make sure that I'm actually successful with my BISO? What are those things? How are we going to get there? What does the BISO bring me of value? What is that value prop for bringing BISOs into my organization? So let's talk about some of the benefits. First and foremost, your BISO function helps drive innovation. By being a part of the business and understanding the objectives of the business and where the business is headed, your BISO can help bring security to those conversations in a way that is meaningful and provides that true enablement. It makes sure that when we're adopting security practices, they're security practices that are going to make us better in terms of innovation. How does my security practice that I want you to introduce to your pipeline make it faster? How does it speed up that CICD? It certainly isn't by coming to you with some new tool where you got to send source code out to a third party to be reviewed for 2 days or a week, and then wait for the response to come back and then react to the response. No, your BISO is there to understand that, all right, we need to introduce this differently. We need to look at automation, but more than that, we need to look at how this is integrated into the development pipeline. So my developers maybe have their tools in the IDE. How can I leverage things like threat modeling? Now that's a whole other talk I do, but how can I leverage threat modeling to actually make my pipeline faster? That's what the BISO is there for. BISO is there to help you in funding. BISO is helping you align, truly align cybersecurity with the initiatives that your business is interested in chasing. So when I have conversations with people in the business portions of my division, I'm not talking to them about, hey, we're going to install this new filtering on our outbound web proxy, and well, that's going to make us more secure. That conversation means absolutely nothing to a group of analysts who do credit ratings all day. What do they want to hear? How are you making it easier for me to release a credit rating? How are you making it easier for me to fulfill all the regulatory and compliance requirements that I have to do that are a part of my job? How are you getting me better functionality in the tools that I use today? So as a BISO, by understanding the business, being in that position, I'm able to align security initiatives and tie them in and to actually gain sponsorship from those business lines for the various initiatives that not only that I'm spearheading, but that the corporate information security team is spearheading. And what happens when you can do that? Well, that's when you get the money. When your business buys in and they're going to sign off and say, yes, we understand how this is going to make our lives better, we want to support this. Now it's so much easier to win the money. But we're also improving agility. I talked about the CICD before. How do we improve agility as a BISO? Again, it's that tie. How do I look at making sure that things that my security team has on their list, things that they're targeting, how do I bring that to a CICD in the way that it meets my engineering teams where they live, using their tools, automating into their systems, speaking their language? Because it's that improved agility that allows me to get to that level where now I don't have to break builds. where now I can release a vulnerability knowingly into production because I know that my CICD is strong. That pipeline is going to bring a P1 defect through and get it fixed in the very next cycle. The BISO helps drive that. And that improved agility, that's what your executives want to hear about. They don't want to hear about reducing risk. I mean, that's great. And yeah, they talk about risk and they're there to focus on that. But when you can tell them, hey, I'm actually going to make our pipeline faster so we're able to produce more releases quicker and we can address more functions, more functionality, more feature requests, more user stories on a faster basis, that's wonderful. That wins you support for your security program. Why? Because it also creates competitive advantage. As a BISO, I'm always focused on how can security within my organization be established as a competitive advantage. And indeed, we're doing that right now within my organization. We're actually looking at services based on cybersecurity practices that we can release as a standout market solution. How do I make that look different than what my competitors are trying to do? How do I leverage the security knowledge and maybe even some of the security practices that we do within our own organization and bring that to bear in the market to produce something that's market leading? That gets your executives excited. Things that are going to build market competitive advantage. And then finally, improving profitability. At the end of the day, it's always about profitability, right? How much money are we making? Cybersecurity can absolutely improve profitability. Think about simple example, oversimplified, but it works. If you're spending a lot of money in your help desk on rebuilding machines that have been hit with ransomware or been hit with some form of malware, that's a really easy justification for bringing in EDR, now isn't it? Hey, I'm going to spend $2 million on this tool that's going to give us this capability, and it's going to reduce the cost on our help desk by X amount. That improves profitability. Reducing works in progress, that improves profitability. Speeding up that pipeline improves profitability. Becoming more mature in DevSecOps improves profitability. Speak in terms of that profitability. That's what your BISO is there to help you with. How can I tie my initiatives to things that are going to bring revenue? And how am I going to use cybersecurity to enhance that revenue? It can be done. It does get done. I do this all the time. This is what a BISO's job is for. But that all sounds well and good. There are pitfalls. I've done a lot of I've gotten out in the industry. I've talked to people. The thing is, the BISO role is very new. You think CISO is a young title in the industry? BISO is even younger. And if I look at different organizations have done this differently. Every one of them implements the BISO in their own way. Now, through some conversations, informal conversations with other BISOs, also a informal survey I ran, I've gathered some information. I've been able to identify where some of those pitfalls lie. So one of the first ones is in reporting structure. Now, I sort of alluded to this before, but a mistake that a lot of organizations make is they have their BISOs report to the CISO. Why is this problematic? Well, think about this for a minute. I'm asking a BISO to be an advocate on behalf of the business. I want them deeply entrenched in what the business is doing and, advocating on behalf of that business when they talk to the information security team. So if they're reporting to the CISO, the person who's in charge of that information security team, that creates that opportunity for an undue influence that really is going to break that model. We want the BISOs to be independent of the information security team so that they can advocate credibly on behalf of the business. So do away with that thought of CISOs reporting to the BISOs reporting to the CISO. The BISO is similar to a deputy CISO, but it is not the same. A deputy CISO is someone who just basically shares the load for the CISO. They report to the CISO. Maybe they're aligned to a specific business unit or division to try to bring some of that context. But at the end of the day, they're just another mouthpiece from information security. Trying to ask a deputy CISO to advocate for the business is very difficult. So instead, we want to align the BISOs somewhere within the division. But then we kind of do this thing oftentimes where maybe we have the BISO buried in the division. We put them at a really low tactical level. Remember, I said BISOs need to be very strategic. We need to be responsible for cybersecurity strategy. Well, if I'm reporting to an IC manager or a line manager, as some of us would refer to them, I'm not in a position where I can have that influence. I'm not in a position where I can bring that transformational strategy to bear across my division. And this makes it challenging because now I don't have that ability to see across what the division is doing. I don't have that ability to think strategically. BISOs who get put into these roles are forced to think very tactically. Their focus is very narrow. The scope of what they're doing is limited, and that takes away from much of the benefit that we're able to bring in terms of enabling that innovation and in terms of growing our overall maturity in DevSecOps. So we don't want to do that either. What we want to look at is how do we have the BISO aligned at a reasonably elevated level. Now, within my organization, I report directly to the CTO of my division. What does that mean? It means I'm still reporting within the division. You want your BISO reporting to somebody who's at the highest levels within your division, those executives. If your division doesn't have executives within it, who is at the top of the division or at the top of that business unit? Is it a vice president? Is it an AVP, an EVP? Who's up there? And that's where we want them reporting. This gives them that visibility. It gives them that ability to even influence, even without authority. So I'm constantly in conversation with my peers. I'm actually in conversations with my CTO's peers. The higher up, whether titles should matter or not, the point is a lot of times they do. And so having that BISO be a title that is for somebody who is at a higher level in the organization enables a lot of conversations that otherwise are too easily dismissed. So elevate them, give them that visibility. To that end, I mentioned before, burying the BISO too deeply into the organization, this is our second common mistake, is that it puts them in an area of too much tactical focus. We ask BISOs to, if your BISOs are writing cloud formation scripts, they're probably a little too tactically focused. But I know BISOs who've been asked to do that. You want your BISO focused higher level on that culture, building security culture, building a security-minded culture. I told you I don't even like security first as a term. Security-minded. Security is just part of everything that we do. It's not even something that we think about as a separate piece. We want security to just be embedded in our tools, our technologies, our people, our process, and our governance. So I need my BISO to have that focus. I don't want my BISO buried in the weeds of solutioning individual challenges. I want them building that roadmap of initiatives that are going to get me to a higher level of maturity, get me to that point that security becomes a matter of improving resilience, continuous improvement, always getting better, always improving upon where we're at today. That's the goal of the BISO. So if your BISO has got a very tactical focus, you're losing so much of that value that they can bring to those conversations. And then I sort of alluded to this already too, but the lack of visibility is another. Your BISO not only should be in a reporting structure that gives them visibility, but they should be encouraged to be a part of conversations that give them visibility. If there's a presentation where you're updating your corporate board on the cybersecurity posture of your organization, invite the BISOs to that conversation to share what's going on with their business lines specifically. Before I joined my division, that was often how it happened, was the CISO would give that update. So in my case, because of regulatory things and because of the way we're structured, I have multiple boards that are specific to my division of ratings. So imagine the CISO at the corporate level trying to speak to a division-specific board. That's tough because he doesn't understand what we're doing. My CISO is great. He's a wonderful person to work with. I enjoy working with him. But I can't expect them to have the level of business context that's necessary to have those conversations. So with a BISO, having the BISO go and make that presentation to be that part of those conversations, it's a valuable, valuable tool. And I promise you, it's very effective when you're trying to win buy-in from the board. Get the BISO in front of your executive team. I mentioned I'm speaking to my CTO's peers fairly often. Our chief risk officer, our chief legal officer, our chief operating officer. It's important that the BISO has that visibility because you're going to want them to be able to have that influence without authority. How can they bring a meaningful cybersecurity message and motivate those areas of the business that aren't thinking about cybersecurity as their primary job focus? So how do you make this happen? Let's talk about some best practices. As a BISO, how are you going to do this? So great, I've decided I'm going to roll out the BISOs. We're going to have this role now within my organization. Each division is going to get a BISO. Cool. How does that BISO make that work? First and foremost is something we all typically do at some level in the business. We probably somewhere are identifying our top risks. As a BISO, it's no different. You should be looking at the top risks. You should be understanding what those business risks are and letting that inform what are your top cybersecurity risks. Let me tell you, they don't often, or always anyway, align with the CISO's top cybersecurity risks. I can tell you mine don't. There are some that do. Ransomware, everybody's worried about ransomware. That's the top of my risk priority list, just as it is for the CISO. But because of my highly regulated environment and the type of information that my division is privy to and charged with protecting versus what the other areas of the organization do, insider threat is a much bigger risk for my division than it is for the others. So it's a much bigger risk for me than it is for the CISO. So having that ability to understand those top risks, because those are what's going to drive your vision, your strategy, and that's what we're talking about next. Have a vision of mission, values, and a roadmap. Now, these are the vision, mission, and values that I actually created for my role here at S&P. I'm not going to read them to you. Hopefully you can read them. Feel free to screen print them. There's nothing there that's confidential. But if you notice as you read through that, nothing in my vision, mission, or values talks about how, cybersecurity alone in a vacuum. Notice how you see cybersecurity's value is derived from business enablement. This is how I bring credibility as I'm talking with my engineering teams. I just had engineering teams in my office here a few minutes ago, a number of members, and being able to talk to them about how I'm fighting for them. I'm advocating for them. I mean, we're talking about this Log4j situation right now, and how I'm getting priorities from my incident response team, and how I'm bringing that, and I'm working with that to make sure that those directions make sense, that we're not overdoing it, that our response is the correct response and the best way to address the risk in the most efficient way possible, because we don't want to be slow. Nobody wants to be slow reacting to this. I mean, honestly, the fact that our industry is 5 days into this and it's still a problem is a concern for all of us. So how do I make sure that within my organization that we're doing it the best, fastest way possible? That takes understanding the business. And sometimes that takes fighting on behalf of the business. So putting those values, that vision, that mission out there and saying, this is what's driving my strategy, and then laying it out in a roadmap. I am really big on roadmaps. This is something I work with my security team all the time as well. Getting these initiatives together and laid out and showing how they build progressive, how they build your progressive maturity. Sorry, mine went blank there for a moment. Showing that progression from here's where we're at today, here's how these initiatives align, here's how one feeds into the next, into the next. First of all, your boards and your executives love that because that's what they want to see. They don't want to hear about the what, they want to hear the why. And it's, hey, these are the 3 things we're doing in this swim lane because it's going to bring us from here to here. That's what they want to hear. Now, what's better is when you take these initiatives and go win buy-in for them with your business. Get your businesses to sign on that, yeah, this aligns with something that I'm doing, so I'm going to support this. Because now you make them allies in getting each progressive step done. They might be looking at something that they need to get completed, but it's dependent on another area of the business getting their thing completed. So now they become your advocate and they help you out. And you can leverage that. So having that roadmap is crucial. And so I work with the security team on this as well. I coach the security team. Hey, build your roadmap for what you're trying to do, and I will help you align that with the business and get you sponsorship from the business so we can make these things happen. That is such a powerful tool because then what you're going to do is you're going to take that information in front of the executives and the board, and you're going to provide regular updates because I promise you they eat this stuff up. This is the kind of presentation they want to see. So often we go in there as security people and we tell them about our vulnerability counts and these weird metrics that don't mean anything to them. What we don't tell them is here's how we're getting better. Here's how we're dealing with, okay, we're here today and ransomware is a concern. This is how we're going to make it less of a concern. This is how we're going to become more resilient to it. Here's the initiatives we've lined up and they're going to get us to this point here. Are we going to be perfect? Never. But we're focused on this continuous improvement. Talk to them about the whys, not the whats. When you have a roadmap, it's easy to do that. And it's easy for them to understand without having to get into all the technical details. They don't want to hear about EDR and CASB and all the other weird things that we talk about in the security world. How are you making the business better? How does this thing align to the business? Well, hey, we're doing these initiatives. It gets us from here to here. And by the way, this business line is bought into this because it's going to help them launch this new capability, or it's going to help them open up a new revenue stream. Those are the things that when you excellent feedback, get support from the boards. And if you don't believe me that this works, I will share with you a personal example. I'm going to brag a little. I just got done with a conversation with one of my boards 2 weeks ago, in which the board said to me, without my prompting, we need to get you more people. How magical is that as a security leader to have your board tell you that they feel the need to get more people on your team? That's what we all want, isn't it? We go in there, we complain all the time that we can't get more money for people. Let's do that. These things work. So yeah, a little shameless bragging, but it's an example of how this actually can work. When you go in there prepared those ways, that is what they want to hear from you. And it creates such a great relationship with them because it's on all their minds all the time. And then finally, build your BISOs as a community. Your BISOs should constantly be working together and bringing a shared message to your information security team. Because sometimes it's really easy for information security to sort of divide and conquer. You want your BISOs sharing information between each other and then bringing a united front. I hate to say that because it sounds adversarial, but bringing that to the information security team, influencing as a group, driving a shared message where now you're not just aligning with your business, but you're helping security align across the businesses, because that's how they're going to win support for the initiatives that you're looking at. And you're saying, yes, I want them to win that. I want them to bring us that new SCA tool, or I want them to get money in order to do this security initiative in our cloud environment. So make it a community, and a community that interacts regularly, that does security events and things within your organization. This is how we get to that point of giving them the fun car, the one that's fast, but it's also safe for them to drive. So it's time for me to wrap up. here's my information. If you want to continue the conversation, if you got questions, you want to hear more about some of the results of my survey or anything else, I'm happy to share that. Twitter, by far the easiest way. LinkedIn and my website are both there as well. Go ahead, screenshot that real quick before I move on. And I'd be happy to converse with any of you. I'm always looking to have more conversations around the cybersecurity topics. And then finally, great big thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you to S&P for not only allowing me to be here today, but giving me some really great material to work with and to share with all of you. And then, of course, thank you as well to Planet Cybersec, Layer 8. So thrilled to be a part of this. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. And I hope to hear from you all real soon.